Good evening and welcome to another episode of Raise the Bar, the Sky High and Fly Jump Camps podcast. I'm your host, Troy Haynes, and joining me tonight is Jarrick Wright from Texas. How you doing tonight, Jarrick?
Doing good yourself?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Surprisingly busy for this time of the year. For me, usually this is usually a really slow time of the year. Summer can be kind of busy after the season, like last year, and then the fall with football and basketball being in season, a lot of the best athletes are doing other sports. So my jumpers will dwindle. But I had a pretty good recruiting summer and found more than a few kids that are actually track only. So it's worked out for me. How's the fall treating you?
It's been pretty well so far. Different approach this season around. We're getting ready for our first indoor meet in December in Birmingham. So we have a few jumpers, a few sprinters who are trying to get ready for that first meet in the next couple of weeks, or I should say a month.
Awesome. So tell my listeners and your listeners where you're coaching now, Jarrick.
I'm coaching at the University of St. Thomas in Houston, Texas. So I pretty much coach the sprints, the high jump, triple jump, long jump, um, anything besides the pole vault right now.
That's a nice. Are you the head coach? Or are you the head assistant coach? Or what's your official title other than coaches sprints and all the jumps except pole vault?
First season as the head coach for this upcoming
Awesome.
year, so super
Awesome.
excited.
And what level are you at there? Is that a D3, D2, D1?
D3.
Okay. So I'm in an NAIA school, which is way down on the ladder. But how many students? How big is the team? And how big of a pool you drawing from there?
This year we have about 44, 45 student athletes just on the sprint side alone.
Okay. That's a decent sized team. Where did you do your the stuff before you became a coach? Your high school and college sports.
So ran at St. Sam Houston State here in Texas as well. And then probably before that, I was at Eisenhower High School. I was just a 100, 200 runner.
Did you play football or do anything else, or just track and field?
Did football my freshman and sophomore year, and then eventually I was um, peer pressured by my teammates to just focus solely on track. So it
Okay.
kind of played in my favor.
Yeah. Yeah. The man, see, I don't know anything about that because it's all secondhand for me. But the Friday Night Lights and football in Texas is crazy, right? At the high school level, is it as much as crazy as everybody says? It just looks like it means everything.
Oh yeah, it's crazy. I mean, you have playoff games before you get to the state championship, where you're looking at about maybe 16 to 18,000 like just fans in the
Yeah.
crowd. So
Uh huh.
it's pretty serious.
Yeah. Yeah. Everybody really gets into it, and then it's a way of life out there, right? You got a lot of pro teams. What you got the Cowboys, you got the Texans, you've got Texas. University of Texas is huge. You got Texas A&M. Is Baylor in the state of Texas? Where's Baylor?
Right in the center. So I would say maybe about 2 hours away from University of Texas.
Mm-hmm. So you got a lot of major programs, and it doesn't seem like anybody has any trouble fielding a team. So you got a ton of talent in Texas, right? So, and then oh yeah, it's pretty wild. So you did the meteoric rise. It looked like from what you sent me on your bio from assistant coaching and just flew up the ladder there. Did you always know that you wanted to be a head coach type, or that you even wanted to coach? I know sometimes that just happens. It happened to me, but I'm always curious to hear how it works with everybody else.
Honestly, it wasn't my primary focus. How I got into coaching was my high school coach, Coach Williams, back on the high school level. She wanted me to come back down to talk to a few kids in our whole district. And then one thing led to another. I eventually started working with the sprinters and then the jumpers. And then I figured why not take it to the college level. By 2019, that's became a volunteer. But then 2 years after that, I became an assistant, and then a year after I became the head coach.
There you go. It's awesome. Um, Texas State too, right? There's another one, Texas State. I've done an interview with a gal that was a heptathlete at UCLA who is now there. John Phillips, my old teammate, who's a thrower, is the head coach, and she does the jumps and everything. I think it's Lexi. But anyway, I just keep thinking of all these programs in Texas. Huge state. Is Texas officially bigger than California? What's the size difference? I can't remember. There's like New York, California, Texas, Alaska is really big, right? Big states.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we're still behind California, but talent wise,
Yeah.
I feel it's kind of like Nick and Nick.
Can't be much. Can't be much. All right. So, Jarrick, getting down to brass tacks now. Here on Raise the Bar, I like to explore anything and everything that can benefit a coach or an athlete that is in search of, help in their performance, help in their training, help in their mental outlook, their diet, whatever it is that, they're trying to improve upon for, obviously improve performance, increase success. So I've become more in the last 10 years, I think. I was a high jumper in high school, a little bit of pole vault, no speed to speak of. I remember being fast when I was in the 6th grade when my legs were shorter, and then when I got really tall, apparently I wasn't strong enough to move those legs quickly enough. And I remember playing free safety in high school, my senior year, running a 5 flat 40, very Brady-esque. And, all the guys were like, I thought you were on track, and I'm like, I'm a high jumper, man. I'm not a sprinter. So I didn't have any speed, but I could jump over stuff. Right. So I was definitely, you would have to categorize me as a power jumper. When I got to college, I put on 15 pounds my freshman year and promptly dropped 4 inches in jumping. I went from 210, 6'10" 3/4 down. I dropped 2 the first year, but I only jumped 6'8" 3/4 once. Had a terrible freshman year. And then, it took me a while to adjust to carrying all that extra weight. I never really lost that weight. I think I'm still 195 pounds now. So I played football at 6'3", 180. I got up to 6'3", 195, and all of a sudden I couldn't jump until I started lifting. That's when I discovered how important squats, cleans, lunges, step ups, all that stuff was, because right after I squatted 400 pounds full squat, I went back up to 7'2". So definitely categorize me as a power guy, double arm pump, gather, reach back, and big knee drive, all those kinds of things. And so I learned it and preached it and taught it for a long time, and just recently have really become enamored of the single arm, watching people run fast. At the world level, I just see so many guys that are just really fast, really tall, really light, and they just seem like they just run off the ground really gracefully. And so I've been basically trying to create my own fleet of speed jumpers, single armers, and starting from the ground up, and spent more than a few years looking at it and thinking, I could coach this. I understand once I figured out what I thought were the mechanics behind it, but then comes the rub with the speed, because I didn't have any. And, I got trained a little bit on how to get my speed up. And I think I was able to run about a 4.7 in college, but that was in track spikes on, on the track. And I think I had a rolling start too. So I never really got super fast, but the speed aspect is something that I'm really curious about, like how to train for it and how to periodize for it, right? Periodize training cycles and all that. And then just kind of, I don't know, like help our viewers out, or help our listeners out, and our and me out with kind of a general overview maybe of, because it sounds like not only do you have a sprint background, but you're also coaching every single jump except the pole vault, which I'm sure if you could add that to your resume pretty soon. So how do you go about making sure that your long jumpers, especially, right, long and triple, do they do the same kind of workouts as your sprinters, or are they very similar, or do you do it differently?
Honestly, I like to start off with just proper mechanics. I feel like long, triple, high jump is all the same kind of the background that you're looking for. If it's not great um, mechanics, then you really can't to execute like the jump itself. So beginning, we usually start off in, just flats, just kind of going through just the basic drills and then applying the same drills into the run mechanics, into the approaches. Um, Start with the high jump. I feel the better you can maintain your speed, not necessarily running as fast as you can, helps you kind of adjust to the angles. Obviously, you can go into the takeoff itself. Um, then once we kind of mastered that, that's when we start to go over to the high jump matter, just the runway itself. And then I tried to naturally kind of figure out, are you going to be more of a single arm jumper, double arm?
Right.
Are we jump off the right foot, honestly? So I take our time behind just the basics.
Mm-hmm. So mechanics wise, I've preached more so in the high jump, because I'm convinced even the speed jumpers, the speed single armers, that are really running fast for compared to most high jumpers. There are some fast double armers out there, but I really don't think there are as many, just based on the length of the approach. Usually I see power jumpers will 9 times out of 10, they're standing there, right? They're rocking back and forth. And if you watch them 10, 9, 10 steps approach, maybe 12, from a stand, and it's hard to get going full speed from that. So, they're going to be able to control their speed. They're going to be able to hit vertical probably a little bit easier than somebody who's moving faster. I always tell my kids, shouldn't say kids. I work with a lot of high school kids, but I do have college and some elite. But it's like I say, hey, if you're moving really, really fast, what are the odds you're going to hit vertical better than you did when you were going slow? I mean, it's really easy to hit vertical when you're not moving very fast. You can self-correct even on the way up and make sure you're going straight up. Whereas if you're really running around the curve fast and you're getting pulled across, it's a lot harder. You got to figure out some mechanics to, help yourself with that. So I'm like, the speed aspect is huge for getting what I call easy air. I don't know sometimes if if you're doing other sports, let's say if you got a single armor in the high jump and you're playing volleyball, and you're like, okay, you're in this tiny little area, and here's the set. Are they going to be able to go up and jump? Because I've been training some single armors now, and the stuff that I do with double armors doesn't work as well. Like if I put them at a 0 step and I go, just put your foot on the ground, lean back and go. Now that's difficult for both, to be honest. But if I give them 1 step, I mean, I remember with 1 step with me, I'm like, well, in 1 step, I can get some speed going. I can get my arms back and boom, I can bring you something, and you start to get better and better at that. And then, with a couple of steps, you go back. But from 0, 1, and even some 3s for single armors, I feel like they're at a disadvantage because you just can't get going that fast in 3 steps. If you roll into it a little bit, okay, but now we're really talking about a 5 step. So, the speed is huge. And so, what was my point? I was talking about, you were talking about the importance of mechanics. And for me, the high jumpers, I'm always talking about center mass. Man, let's get taller. Let's get your knees up. I want your knees up around at least hip height, and I've seen plenty of videos of all these guys running by. Bondarenko, there's Tamberry, there's, Brandon Stark from Australia, there's, Barshim, and you watch them run by, knees are up, their feet kicking them in the butt, perfect high cycling, right? And I'm like, hey, you guys got to have strong hamstrings, you got to have strong hip flexors, you got to pull all your crap up, start swinging your arms like the Russians, get them up there. I'm like, the taller you are, it's got to be easier to get all your stuff into the air, So I have kind of preached that the high jump running style is different in my view than a sprint style. Because like I would say, first of all, sprinters are usually leaning forward, right? At the start, for sure. You watch any power jumper, how they start. First step, they drop down, lean forward, and start pushing. Now they may start to stand up, and then, but if they're running faster, my contention is you're probably leaning forward more. And I think that creates a problem in that, as I get to the takeoff, I'm going to have to do something to change that angle. If I'm too far forward, I'm going to do a front flip, or whatever when I get there. If my head's in front of my foot, at takeoff, that's not going to work. So I got to lean back somehow. So I'm always trying to say, hey, I want to use the speed training that you would do, coach, with your technique, your mechanics. I've been doing my research and talking with, some of my friends that are sprint coaches like yourself. And I'm like, what do you do? I get guys tell me, well, we got a contrast day, right? So contrast, we're running against some resistance of some kind, either a parachute, or you're pulling a sled, or you got an exergenie, or you're running uphill, or bleachers, or, whatever it is. And then another day during the week, at least one of those 2 days, we're going to do some speed, just flat out, and that takes different forms, of course. But I'm like, well, my contention with all that, I'm like, man, I always thought, the guys that jumped the best for me were the guys that came straight out from basketball, right? And what kind of training do basketball players do? They run short sprints. Even when you're playing in the game, everything's a short sprint. You're going from here to here to here. It's like 5 or 6 steps in one direction. You got to change directions quickly. You don't run in straight lines, but if you do, what's the longest distance you can run on a basketball court? 88 feet. Okay. How many meters is that? It's not much. So I'm like, okay, the length of the court isn't that much, and I got to cover it quickly. All right. So, but basketball always seemed perfect, right? They run up and down. If you watch lines, they run lines, right? From the end line to the free throw line, back. From the end line to half court, back. From the end line to the far free throw line, and back. And you do that a few times, you're like, well, it's perfect. And all I really would put in there is maybe a little more rest, in between for a high jumper. Because, specifically, how long does a high jump last? 5 seconds, maybe 6. 5's a lot, right? And you go, most of that is in the approach, in the running part, right? So I only need you to be able to run 40 yards would be a long approach, right? So I keep thinking that if I'm sprinting 75 meters, 100 meters for a high jumper, in a lot of ways is overtraining, So that gets us to the other end where I wanted to talk about Tony Holler. But what was my other question for you? We were talking long, and you talked about mechanics and how that related to high jumping, and I went a little crazy on that. And then, so inside your training week, how many days do you spend on speed? I'm always worried about overtraining, right? Because my shins were always just toast until I got into college and I figured out some of the knees over toast guy stuff. But volume was always the thing that got me after high school. Once I learned how to stretch, those problems started going away. And then overuse injuries were the only ones that were still there to plague me. But those really went away until my senior year, when I just went crazy on plyos and I got tendonitis in both knees from just silly overtraining. But, when you come back to volume, I always think about, sprinters, because I've seen the sprinters with their shins taped up too. So how much do you run them, and how do you avoid that kind of stuff? What do you do with that, Jarrick?
Yeah, so with the sprints, especially in this semester, I would say we probably spend maybe about 3 days out the week, and then I would say also 3 days with the jumps. But how I kind of break down the jumps is more so one day we're just strictly just on the turf, again, staying in flats, just working on just the bounding mechanics. And then if we are to do any type of approaches, one day kind of short approaches, but then the other day just kind of setting the mindset in a sense. So kind of like knowing your routine of how you want to approach the jump itself. So same deal, like you're saying, like trying to avoid, the shin problems. The base you can get with the mechanics itself. Take a little bit of the speed, what you're taking from the track itself, figuring out their timing, and then once you kind of figure out the right routine for yourself for each individual, especially for us, just because we don't have those high jumpers, we have athletes who also do the triple jump. So sometimes on those days, you're just strictly just focusing on just the triple jump. So obviously different routine that you're going about, and then the other day trying to attack high jump in a different mindset. So
right,
kind of be able to balance all three of it. And as you know, with some athletes, they start to get a little excited once they start seeing a little bit of an improvement, just a change. Oh, coach, I need to do that one more rep. It's like one rep turns into 5, 5 turns into 10. And
yep.
Now we're sitting out 3 or 4 days is because now we're dealing with the ankles and shins now.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's one of the banes of my existence. But I've gotten better over the years. I've been doing this a long time now. And I had Barbara Bachaka came down to me from Canada, and she hadn't been training for a while. And she was just full, juice, ready to go. And she would be that, just like a kid sometimes. And we got along well, thinking through things and trying new things and kind of inventing drills, and a lot of a really good cohesion going there. But it was at the same time, it's hard to cut that off. Like you said, you're having a good day. You've made a higher bar in a drill than you usually do. And it's like, man, I want to push. And you're just like, man, you've already taken like 20 jumps, man. We need to wrap this up, And, she fought a little bit, and I gave in a little bit, and then, a little bit too much. And right at the end of that season, she strained her Achilles, and so I learned I got to remember to put my foot down, because I can usually see it. I'm sure you've developed that skill. You're going along and they take that last jump, and I'm like, okay, that's it. You don't have anything left. I don't need to see what you had left, because that was it. And, in some ways, they need to have the jump timing, for just how long to ride, before you clear heights. And there is I heard stories. I remember when I was jumping at UCLA, and we would hear these things about the Russians, quote unquote, the Russians, what the Russians do with their plyometrics and blah, blah, blah. But I'd heard somebody say that, the Russians used to train heavy, heavy plyometrics and then do their technique work. And I thought about that, and I was like, but doesn't that just, kill the whole thing? But then I thought about it, and I go, when we were really, really tired, now I'm sure they weren't able to jump as high as they wanted to, but it doesn't mean you can't do technique work. Because I do a lot of my technique work at low bars. I'm just like, hey, especially when there's some major teaching going on, some laying of foundational stuff, it doesn't even make sense to have the bar high, because they're going to try so hard physically to jump it that they can't focus on technique. So I'm like, you need to hit this angle, you need to hit this position. Let's just make it, and that's why I start, closer to the bar with less speed, and, you can build up and go back. But that working tired and working on technique, I always say, okay, but yeah, I don't know if I had the guts for that. And everybody that reminds me of that, they said, you got to remember the Russians had a ton of people, and they would just run them all through the system, and whoever made it out, was superior. they made it through the training. Everybody else that they broke along the way, they're just like, you no good, off to the side, and everybody else, you're just like, these are the world champions, and it's like, okay, you run 100,000 people through it. You got 25 left, they're tough. They're definitely tough, battle tested, as it were. What was my question for you? Oh, so this is I don't know if it's a controversial topic. You're closer to Tony Holler than myself, because he's in Illinois and you're in Texas. So I recently had Tony on, and if you're not familiar with him out there, either Jarrick or my listeners, he's a sprint coach from Illinois who coined a term called feed the cats. And his feed the cats philosophy just says that speed is everything, that the workouts that his coaches made him do in high school almost made him quit. He hated them. He was a 400-meter runner, and so they were running 600s, 500s, 400s, and their legs were killing him all the time. And he just hated going to practice. And I forget exactly how he came up with the idea. I remember his idea that sprinters rule the roost, and you and I both know that. You have sprinters that can high jump, long jump, triple jump, and do everything for you. And he came to that same realization when he went to a state meet, and he thought he was loaded up with the perfect distance team that was going to destroy everybody. And apparently it was 110 degrees and 85% humidity, and his distance team died. They just literally did nothing. And the team that won had a bunch of sprinters, and he was like, I need to rethink this. And he retooled his philosophy to, feed the cats. The sprinters do everything for you. You have someone, and it's a huge advantage, I'm sure, at the college level, right? Because you're not limited to 4 events. If you needed to use them, you could go 100, 200, 400, 4x1, 4x4 long jump, maybe they even hurdle for you. I'm sure, right? You have some, because you said you only have 44 bodies and you got a lot of events. So, training the speed, again, huge, but how you do it, I'm sure if you went across the face of this country, there's, people that were brought up traditionally, and then maybe there's some guys following Tony now that, he's had this out there for a while. I tend to learn everything late. So even though Instagram has kind of opened up my eyes a little bit, I know he's been out there for a while. And so he just came across my feed one day and I was like, who's this guy? I'm listening along. I'm like, okay, he's had some success. Let's listen to this guy. And then what he said about Feed the Cats just resonated with me, just because everybody says high jumpers are lazy. And I would have to say they're probably right. So I wasn't always crazy about running a whole lot. I remember one year my coach made me run a 400 and I was like, what in the heck am I running a 400 for? I said, I'm not going to run 400 meters to a bar ever. I need to run 12 to 15 full approaches, from 50 to 60 feet. And I need to be able to go fast, so, and everybody's got their different things on it. So how do you approach it, coach, with your, you've got your lifting, you've got technique. First of all, I'm curious. I don't often see the sprinters in the weight room. So what do you have this, just the guys that are sprinters? Do you have anybody who's just a sprinter? Or are they all jumpers too? You have a few. So do those guys lift the same way? Are they doing squats and cleans and that kind of stuff? What do they do?
Yeah, so I would say baseline for everyone, we're strictly focused on a lot of Olympic lifts. So we do a lot of hang cleans, for example, plyos for, we like to do a lot of box jumps from here and there. Not too often, but I like to sprinkle in here and there in the training plan. But the jumpers have it kind of fall in between the mix of that. It's just more kind of isometric, kind of like isolating a lot of the muscles, because I tell them all the time, like, you're not jumping off of, both legs, like you're sitting right. Jump off your dominant foot, but then obviously you want to get that balance between
yes,
within the hips and obviously within the hamstrings as well. So we sprinkle in here and then. I like to, in my mind, try to simulate some of the movement either within the high jump or the long jump.
Yes,
and then really try to do kind of a prevention injury. So like, and then to prevent like the knees, starting to buckle a little bit, or even like the shin, especially with the ankle stability. So
yeah,
any small little detail we can kind of like focus on.
How about your core and your like hip flexors? You're saying those are, I'm guessing the hip flexors maybe with bands or like monkey's feet or something like that, right? So you can get the knees up. And then I've been noticing a lot of Nordics. I really like the looks of those Nordics for the hamstrings instead of the old hamstring curl. Nothing wrong with a hamstring curl either, but I just like the idea of the Nordics and the reverse Nordics. What you brought up here, Jarrick, about the single leg stuff is where I think a lot of coaches out there, if you're listening and you're a newbie coach, or maybe you haven't thought about it before, but the prevalence that I've been seeing on Instagram for one-legged lifts is huge. And it totally makes sense. I wouldn't say that it's revolutionized my coaching, but it's revolutionized my thinking, in that really the only drill that I can ever remember doing that was two-legged was backovers for high jumpers. You're just standing on two legs, you jump back over. And I was like, I had some people that are just outrageously good at it. They're real flexible. They drive their arms way up, and then they can pop their hips and get their heads back to get in these beautiful positions. And then when they come through and they run and jump off one leg, it doesn't look anything like that. Not even close. Like they go into a V with their butt down, heads up. They're looking at their feet. I'm just like going, wait a minute, what is so different about this? And I got to the place I'm like, you know what? They're jumping off 2 feet. It's totally different. It's basketball, it's volleyball, it's whatever it is, but it's not high jumping. And I used to do it all the time. I backed over 5'6" when I was in college, which I thought was a big deal at the time, until I saw Brian Stanton, former Olympian that I trained with, jump over 6. And I watched a guy just a couple of years ago on my feed from Greece do like 6'6" standing back over. I'm like, wow. Right. But again, a good thing, but maybe not so important. But obviously the physical part is part of it. So a 2-footed back over jump is definitely not hurting you in training, but my contention is that it's not as specific. So I don't know if I invented it. I'm sure somebody else has thought of it. I always like to think, that I'm the smartest person in the room and that I invented this drill. But I started having my kids do one-legged back-overs. I'm like, just have the other leg down, drive the knee up, get your arms up, and now your back is to the bar the same way it would be as if your knee drove you around there, and then work your layout position. And I'm like, that to me is a lot more specific. I'm doing those fallbacks. They start on one leg with the knee up and start to fall back and then pop their hips and, look back without, sticking their head in the mat and breaking their neck. But, all those things. And I started trying to streamline almost everything I did. Now, earlier in the season, and still sometimes I start with the 2 legs and go to the single leg back over, but all the drills that I can think of, like you're talking about running drills, nobody uses both legs on the ground at the same time in a running drill. You're doing A's and B's and this and that. You're skipping up and down the steps. I'm like, an A drill for me is both a single arm takeoff ready to happen. It's a Fosbury reverse arm. It's a long jump. It's just like running technique. So why wouldn't I do A drills, up onto a box with dumbbells in both hands, for instance? Why wouldn't I vary the heights of the box, from a really high step up, which you're stepping up onto a really high box, you're probably just going to be doing a one-legged squat once you transfer your weight up there, right? If it's lower, you're going to be able to do most of the work. And then I use that with my high jumps and say, hey, use the other leg to push you up onto the box before you do the step up, like transfer from the right to the left, just like it would be on your, if you're coming from the left side. So, but the single leg stuff is just the tip of the iceberg there. I think like every 2-legged one you're talking about, hang cleans, squats, deadlifts, snatch, push press, they can all be done with one leg, every single one of them. And you can change it up. If it's not comfortable doing it with a barbell, do it with dumbbells, do it with bands, whatever. But you're getting the same motion, and you got to balance on one leg, and I always, for years, I've told the kids, I go, whatever drill we're doing, I go, if you're using 2 legs, it's a lot easier than when you're doing one, because you got 2 legs picking up the slack. And that's why some people's hips look so good on a back over, right? Because they got 2 legs pushing their hips up instead of one, and so anyway, I think that's huge. And I think it needs to permeate through, again, you listeners out there, if you haven't done those yet, the stuff that Jarrick was recommending, with the step ups and you said the hang cleans and, some of the other lifts, the single leg stuff is huge. And the same thing behind the knees over toes guy stuff. You put your feet in the tib bar. Well, both feet together is easier than just one. You get to where you're cranking those things with one foot. I remember we didn't have tib bars when I was at UCLA, because in the dawn before time back in the 1980s, but I would put a loop through a plate and hang it off into space over my foot and just hang it down and just pull my toes up and do circles and stuff like that. And my shins were fine after that. I remember thinking, God, I wish I'd have known about this when I was in high school, because I was usually jumping on razor blades by the end of the season, just because we jumped so many times. We jumped 3 days a week, with or without the meets. I mean, just because it was fun. So silly. Oh my gosh. So you mentioned, I had a couple questions for you earlier too. How long have you been coaching now? You're a young guy. I'm really old, so I'm looking at you, and you're already a head coach, and here I am. I'm still just a specialist. But you both have your coaching stuff, and then do you have your own club and your own side business where you do personal stuff?
No club, but usually once we get done with our actual season, I work at the local club that's pretty close to my old high school, the Flying Dragons.
Mm-hmm.
They invited me out to help out with the jumps there, with the sprints. It's ran by Coach Rodney Cole, awesome guy. I love how he runs his program.
Uh-huh.
Probably just as technical as me. To answer the first part of the question, I've been coaching for about 7 years now. So, like I said, still young guy, but I like to look at myself as always like get an opportunity to learn from either younger coaches, older coaches, who have been in the game a little longer than I. So it's always a learning experience for me. So I love what I do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I tell you what, I keep thinking I love the sport so much, and I'm still a frequent topic. We're talking about how to try to grow, track and field in the country. And I'm sure, some people would just go, oh, well, it's bigger than it's ever been. We've got the Nike Nationals, we've got these nationals, we've got all these meets, and there's masters meets and this and that and the other thing. I'm like, yeah, I hear you. And I'm like, but when am I actually seeing it on TV? To me, I see the Olympics once every 4 years. That's when I see most of my track and field, and I'm a coach inside of track and field. Now I see a lot of my meets in person, but I don't see the really, really big meets. You gotta be around. You gotta figure it out, and I'm like, I don't have to figure out football. I don't have to figure out basketball or baseball. Those are on all the time. They're easy to find. We are not so. So I'm like, and I'm praying right now that this money that's hopefully, and I'm sure it's probably not. I think the people that are good at making money are always good at trying to keep other people from making that same money. But it's like with these NIL deals and for instance, UCLA, my alma mater, going to the Big Ten, and they to make the jump, they already gave him $30 million a year, I think was the contract, right, with the Big Ten. So they got $30 million a year, and who knows what they'll negotiate when they redo whatever contract they have, because now they've got the four best teams in the Pac-12, between UCLA, USC, Oregon, and Washington. Those are four major players. They stick them over there in the Big Ten with Michigan and Ohio State, and that's just tried and true. So that money is big, right? And everybody knows that football makes all the money. So when you bring in football money, and I'm waiting to see if the trickle down effect happens, because hopefully some of that money will spill over towards track and say, hey, you guys have more money. You can hire some coaches that know what they're doing and pay them decent money. I'm just blown away by, the fact that 2 years ago, I interviewed for the jumps job at Cal State Long Beach. And I mean, I grew up in Long Beach. I was a native. I jumped at Millikan High School, a great connection between Millikan High School and UCLA, and had years of experience and state champs, both at high school and junior college. And, it was like, and they wanted me to work 5 days a week, all the jumpers, all the multis, pole vault, everything else, and we'll give you $23,000. And I remember thinking, this is crazy. I'm a school teacher. I make way more than that. It was like, so how do you make any money? I mean, if you just graduated and you're thinking about becoming a coach, then 25 grand wouldn't be a bad job. If I just got out of college and I'm not used to making any money. But real quickly, you're going to find that $25,000 a year doesn't do much for you. I mean, where are you going to live? You're not going to be able to live anywhere very long with 25,000, 3,000 a month, a lot of places. And this California is expensive, but I'm looking at that going, that's somewhere to live without food, gas, doctors, right? So I'm like, man, I'm just on the wrong end of the map here. Maybe the SEC is better. Maybe certain conferences have more money that they can, drop towards, qualified coaches at the level. And I'm like, I just don't know enough about it. I don't have I haven't grown my network that far here from California. Right. So, it's interesting to me, but I know I put my name in for some job searches, like what Glassdoor is one of those apps out here. And they'll send me stuff and they'll go, yeah, we're looking for a new volleyball coach at the high school level at this one place. And I'm looking at it and it said $43,000. And I was like, wait, what? I'm like, you're going to pay a volleyball coach $43,000 at the high school level? I'm like, that can't be right. And I'm looking through it and I'm like, and I don't think it was right. But at the same time, part of my brain was like, I think that could be right. Soccer, football, baseball, basketball. You seem like you name the sport, man. We are bringing up the bottom on the pay scale, So I'm like, oh my gosh. And how are you going to get your athletes to come back and want to coach, when that's happening, right? So what would you do to fix it all, Jared? Jarrick, how can we go about making that better for all the coaches and the athletes?
No, it's definitely a problem. I think where you want to really start at, just to bring at least attention to the sport, obviously I would say with the youth. You have, your AAU, USATF. I'm pretty sure there's a few more out there. And like you see with the professional athletes, like I feel if the kids get a chance to see themselves, like on a YouTube link somewhere, if some point down the road we do get access to like ESPN, like network where you can
Right.
see like online, like it's a big, thing for kids just because one, most of the revenues don't come from the lower leagues, and eventually you see it already with the NCAA, especially with the Division One. The talent I think has always been there. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, every single time you watch, your NCAA finals, either if it's in Oregon or here in Texas, you see the best of the best. I mean,
Yeah.
probably top 5 in the world. So getting the talent out there is not the difficult part. It's just really just getting the exposure itself, just to keep bringing that constant attention around it. So I think if you start with the younger kids and then you kind of see a little bit more on that side, you can eventually, build those connections or, get those networks to, buy in on the professional level just because
Mm-hmm.
we have, a Noah Lyles. So, I mean, he's, a character as it is already. Um, Even outside of just the U.S. alone, like, can't remember the guy's name who's the javelin thrower from India. I mean, he has to follow us obviously on Instagram. So, what
Right.
can he do to kind of, improve on that just to get, more attention, just not around him, but just more around javelin, for example, because
Sure.
let's be very fair right now. I mean, yeah, you see a lot of attention around the sprints, but there's not a lot of attention around the field events.
Sure.
It's
Yeah.
coming from a 100-meter guy.
Yeah. No, it's always been that way. I mean, I've shared the story here on this before, but my senior year at UCLA, we had Prime Ticket out here, which I can't remember if it merged into Fox later or what, but I think they're still out here as a smaller thing. But they came to us my senior year and they said, hey, we want to film we want to broadcast your meet against Cal. So Cal came down to go against us in the rain. Surprisingly, they brought the rain with them. Curse them. And we had cameras up on all 4 corners, right? And I mean, everybody was jacked up, right? We're like, yeah, this is gonna be great. We're gonna be on film tonight, and they said, yeah, we'll show it tonight, So we're competing on Saturday. It's gonna be on the same night, like 3 hours later. And we beat Cal in the rain. Mike Powell was on that team with me. Kevin Young, we had a bunch of great sprinters that went on to become Olympic level sprinters within the next couple of years. Danny Everett, Mike Marsh, a lot of great sprinters. And, we came through in the rain and beat them, and we swept the high jump. I remember that. And I'm thinking, oh, this is gonna be great. I got first. Mike Powell got second because he never even bothered to train in the high jump. He was so bouncy. He'd go win the long, the triple, and do some other stuff and come over and, make sure we swept the high jump. And so we did that, and we're sitting around waiting. Bunch of us got together and we're watching, and they showed every running race and not one field event all the way through. Not one. Now, I don't even know if they showed the results of those events. Got to see every lap of the men's 10,000.
Of course.
That was thrilling. And, got to listen to the guys doing their commentary, and they were trying to think up stuff to say, and I'm like, can we cut to commercial? Because I'm really tired of watching these guys run around circles. But they just, the jumps, the throws. I mean, we had great throwers, great vaulters, great, a lot of these guys. I made it to my NC2A finals the only time that year. A couple guys, 17-4, 18-foot pole vaulters, always had shot and disc guys, Kevin Young in the hurl. We had people everywhere. And just didn't see probably half the meet, So, and it is what it is. Now you think about it in the terms of football. It's like, who makes all the money? Well, the quarterbacks. And then now they've determined that running backs are almost useless. So they're getting cheaper than they used to be. But then if you've got an edge rusher, well, he's worth a lot of money. And you got to have guys to block those guys. So the left and the right tackle, depending on the quarterback, those guys are real important. And then we need a couple of lockdown corner guys because it's such a throw-oriented league. And, so everybody structures their teams almost the same way. And the other guys are just kind of spear carriers, but then every once in a while there's a really good one and they, reset the market on what they're doing. But you look at it and I'm like, well, I guess the sprinters just make all the money because you're going to see them more often, more likely, right? So you got a guy that's really good 100, 200. I mean, look at Carl Lewis, right? 100, 200, and 4x1. And the long jump. For most people, they'd probably watch the first three and not really tune into the long jump, because most people don't even, probably follow it that much. Although, everybody knew Carl was going for the 4 golds, right? But with sprinters, you got a lot more airtime probably, right? You're going to be, and I mean, let's face it, when the 100 comes up, everybody's watching. And it's not like it's going to take long to figure it all out. It's like, boom, 10 seconds, got you, done. 9 point, whatever. There's your winner. He's the fastest. Okay, that's great. And then, I think both good and bad, the high jump takes 2 hours to get through the whole thing, so it's like, and not a lot of people are lost in the drama. They're literally lost and there's no drama for them. So it's like, they look back and they go, man, that high jump's been going on for hours. It's like, why can't they get that finished? And so I think the sprints have that, it's on its schedule and there's that buildup, right? And the buzz. And then, if you're there at the track all day and it's a huge meet, maybe you get to see the qualifying rounds and maybe you get to see another round, so they definitely get more time and are probably the media darlings because of it, right? It's harder to double in some of those other events. You don't usually find, a 4 and an 8 or an 8 and a mile, right? I mean, every once in a while, a 10,000 and a whatever, sometimes, yes. And those athletes are amazing. But yeah, there's all kinds of little problems in there. But I think building it up, like you said, is the challenge. What do you think about taking, I saw this last summer. One of my clients actually, someone did a live feed from the Nike meet, the one up in Oregon. I forget if that was Junior Olympics or Nike this, or I forget. Now I get confused because there's Nike Nationals, New Balance Nationals, Adidas, right? Everybody's got their own one, right? And they pick a different part of the country, which to me is actually pretty smart. Say, hey, you get yours over there, we'll get ours over here. Maybe someday they'll arrange a super thing, just like the college football playoff, right? So, and I've heard, I haven't done my research, that some of them are more sprinter and some of them are more jumper and some of them are more distance, and you go through that whole thing. Harder to get in or not so hard to get in, but you got that going. And so he sent this live feed out and that was pretty cool. But then there was lots of dead air, because you just got the camera and here comes a high jumper and it's really loud and you might hear the name called out, maybe not, so I'm like, okay, what's going on? So I had the idea of maybe getting, a high jump buddy and just sitting there with and doing, the live feed, but finding a way to just kind of cut and paste, as we go, or just leave it rolling and do it like a rolling podcast, just go, oh yeah, well, here's the guy from, whatever. And then it's basically 2 guys doing the play-by-play, and having fun with analysis and whatever. And then, excuse me, I would hope to get some angles that you can actually see something from, because I hate with a passion the angles they pick for the high jump. I'm always like, yeah, let's get me standing directly behind the bar so I can't see what in the heck they're doing. I don't know how far away from the bar they are. I don't know if they're driving their knee enough. It's like, you can tell it's the TV people that do it, because it's like, and after 3 replays, sometimes I'm like, oh, okay, there's one. I can use that angle. Thank you. But anyway, boy, we got a powder keg of stuff. So when you're recruiting your athletes now for this smaller college, how do you determine, the guys are going to come there? It sounds like they got to be good at more than one thing for sure. Like, do you have any just single eventers, or do they all do multiple?
I mean, one thing I tell a lot of kids when they come into our program, or the ones that are on our roster now, that the bigs that I look for is for sure versatility, just because if you're able to sprint well, then you'll see the same thing in your jumps. We do have a few who are just working just solely on field events, but yeah, we don't just sell. I mean, like, oh, you're gonna be, the potential future conference champion, national champions. Like, hey, like we're a small program. We're still getting off the ground from 2019. When I first got here, when we had 6 athletes, and now we're up to about 40.
Right.
And really, what I tell each kid that's come back or has been added to our team roster is pretty much we're about just being a family. I'm very particular who I look to add to our roster, just because if I see that you have a passion for the sport, then it's gonna make you want to thrive, not just for 1 year, but all 4 years, or sometimes 5 years for some of the kids. And I really preach hard behind just consistency. I mean, what's the biggest thing to look for when it comes to just the jumps? Can I hit the same mark, meet after meet when it comes to the high jump? Can I at least see some type of small improvement with the longer triple jump? Matthew Hicks, he's one of your biggest fans on Instagram. He follows your page all the time. And
awesome. Good to know.
High school, he was like a 6 even high jumper, and once he got to our school, he improved by 4 inches. And this past season, he actually just entered the 2 meter club. So he was
awesome
at the same time, but not pleased with himself, because in his mind, he's kind of like, okay, well, I want to get to actually the 7-foot range, which hopefully we're gonna get there this season. But he understands that, hey, like, I'm not here to, get to the big goal just yet. I have to kind of take the small baby steps. And once we kind of bring underneath them, like, he's kind of helped, hey, like, you have the big goals, big dreams. So, like, you have support around you, and that's how we've gotten to right now.
Yeah. Well, that's so interesting too, because I have noticed there are guys that, and it still happens, where some guys peak in high school. Let's just say it. Some guys peak in high school. It happens both men and women, but you get a guy, especially, and gals, and this I think is more of the case in the high jump than almost anything else. But many, many times the strength to weight ratio is a huge thing in the high jump. And now I was told, and I don't think, I can honestly say I don't think I've ever said it to a high jumper myself. But I was told by my 2 teammates that were fantastic jumpers at UCLA when I got there, that, after that first year, I was 6'3", 180, which for me, in my mind, I was skinny. I'd always heard the word skinny when I was a kid. You're skinny, you're this, you're that. And my mind heard skinny and equated it with weak, like a skinny 99-pound weakling, like on the old cartoon, the Charles Atlas thing. So, you're the guy on the beach that the guy's kicking sand on and taking your girlfriend. You're skinny, you're weak. So anytime I heard the word skinny, I'm like, man, I'm not skinny. I'm 6'3", 180, but I'm benching 240 in high school, which wasn't that great, but I was over 200. I don't think I squatted as much as I benched when I was in high school. But, when I got into college, those numbers went up. I benched 300 and squatted 400, and I was like, I had people going, dude, you look like a decathlete, and I was like, what do you mean? In my mind, I still looked skinny. You know what I mean? It was like the way that I saw myself was not the way anybody else would see myself. And I was never in danger of becoming a bulimic or this, that, any of that stuff. And I don't think I had a negative self-image, or I wasn't lacking confidence or whatever. But I do remember Dell and Lee were both, slighter of frame. Dell was like 6'1" or 2 and like 165, maybe not even that much. And Lee was taller and actually thinner. I think like 6'4", maybe 160. And so they were just like, dude, you're a buffalo. You're just the biggest thing I've ever seen. You're like 6'3". I was 195. I had some guns. I'd be coming in there, and I'm like, I felt better, doing that. And I was a power guy, like I said. So when my squats were up, I would usually feel pretty good. But the hard part about that was getting him up there. Like I I would go one strong year in the weight room, and then the next year was never as good. So that sophomore year I lifted heavy, and then that junior year I was just like, I'd walk into that weight room and look around and go, I just don't feel like putting all that weight on my back, and I have since amended some things about that, which is interesting. I've decided that deadlifts are better simply because I don't have to load my spine with all that weight in a back squat. So I'd rather do a goblet squat. I was never a big fan of front squats because I don't have great shoulders. That was one thing I was always bummed about. I didn't have really broad, wide shoulders. So putting a bar here was never that great. Doing a goblet's easy. And then doing a deadlift, even those new ones that you can do with the landmines, I look at that, or with the hex bars, I'm like, this is easy, and you can get it's the same as a squat pretty much. I just don't have my hands behind my back and all this weight on my spine. I'm if anything, I'm pulling the other direction. So I'm like, I go, that's kind of changed, a game changer now. I'm wishing. I often think back and go, I wish I could have done this, So I forgot the tangent I was on there, but anyway, you can help me out. I do this all the time. I get lost in a tangent. So I'll just segue back to Jarrick. What was it? We were talking about you and all your athletes and how versatile they had to be. And then you've got everybody in the family there. As a family, as a team, smaller, cohesive unit, everybody's helping each other out. Do they, how many other coaches do you have on your staff besides you, since you're doing so many jobs? Who's doing the throws and the other stuff that you're not doing?
Still looking for a throws coach right now. We recently just had a new jumps coach to help out with the long jump and the triple jump. So first year work on the college level, so I'm just gonna help her as much as I can. Coach Presley, so
yeah,
she was a former jumper at a D1 institution, so she knows the way around the pit.
Nice. And what about distances?
Distance wise, still looking for a distance coach right now, but we do have a former athlete who has decided to step up and kind of fill in that role for the time being.
Awesome. Yeah, I tell you what, I honestly think in just about anything except the hyper technicals, to me, the hyper technicals are like hammer throw and javelin for one, for sure. And even all the years I did of watching it, I kind of pride myself on being able to watch things and figure things out, because I've got a degree in kinesiology and I loved biomechanics, and I do a lot of that stuff when I'm analyzing videos, and I see things in angles and vectors and forces. It's just kind of the way my brain works. So sometimes I can pick things apart and I'll see something that I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. It reminds me of this, and that was one thing I was really blessed to have at UCLA, because I had some great coaches there. I had Art Venegas, throwing shot and disc coach, all the throws. Anthony Kern, one of the best pole vault coaches in the world. John Smith, great sprint coach. And I didn't realize it at the time, because I always thought that I was looking for it for myself. And I was looking for universals, what I would call universal. Like, what does everybody do? Like in track and field, I'm pretty sure almost everybody has done a squat or a clean, or like you're saying, an Olympic lift of some kind, an Olympic regimen. And once the 80s started to roll through and everybody started to learn about plyometrics, now I'm pretty sure that that's worked its way in. When I'm looking at my feed, I see so much speed, agility, ladders, and, quick plyos, and, hurdles and boxes and bleachers, and, all the same stuff, but it's got a wealth more, refinement. It's been developed, really, really, really well. I go through and I'm like, I wonder what I should do for ladder drills. So I just go to my Instagram and type ladder drills on the search, and you can just feed just tons of stuff coming through. And I'll just like, nah. I'm like, ooh, look at that. Okay. I like that one. It's like, it's as simple as that, for speed, whatever, for plyos, boxes, all that stuff, I did my share of those. And then other times I'm just like, oh, I like the way this one is. I saw a guy drop off a box and jump backwards up onto the box. And I was like, man, I had never thought about doing that. And I have been preaching to my athletes that, as you're going into the bar, you should be jumping away from the bar, what you think is away from the bar, because all your forces are directed towards the pit. So I'm like, we got to counterbalance these. You got a big arrow going that way. There's got to be an arrow going this way. And it can't just be your knee drive. So how about your takeoff leg? And I'm like, do you actually go that way? No. But are you resisting? Can it help? Yes. So, and I saw this guy doing the backward plows, and I'm like, oh, that's perfect sense. I totally agree with that. I'm saying I'm going to implement that now. I remember copying that when I saw it, stuck it in a folder on my Instagram, saved folders, labeled it backward plows. And then I made another one for lateral plows. And just like, this makes complete sense to me, when I see it. So, universals, and then, looking at this other stuff, like that's how I noticed you, right away. I was looking through the feed, stuff comes across. I've seen these athletes. Sometimes I'm like, why did so-and-so follow me? And I look down, I'm looking at their profile, and I see, blah, 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 Ianova, Palinova. And I'm like, Russian, Bulgarian, I'm not sure. Athlete. Okay. I'm looking through her stuff, birthday pictures, this, that. And all of a sudden, oh, there it is. Track. I hit track. A couple things. Sometimes they show them on the podium. I'm like, huh. Then I'm looking. Sometimes they show the stadium. I can't see anything. And all of a sudden, there she is running up and jumping over the bar. I'm like, yes, a high jumper. Okay. And then I start looking through the rest of it because I've never been to Russia. I've always wanted to know what they do. What are they doing over there? What kind of plyos are they doing? What kind of drills? And, damn them, they'd never let much out. But every once in a while, I'll see, something, and you're like, wow, this is a really great drill. Or I can see, the rumors are true. They're doing 5-foot depth drops, into something else or whatever it is. Well, hey, Jarrick, any last questions or thoughts? Because I know it's getting late for me. It's 8:30. We've been about an hour, and you're a couple time zones ahead, so I don't want to keep you up too late.
No, I mean, honestly, I would say just for any young coaches, be open-minded, ask questions when you can, network, expand your knowledge around this track, not just the event that you did, but across the whole board. Again, like I said, I was a hunter runner, never did the high jump, did long jump, but I was blessed enough to be around some good athletes when I was back in college. Stayed in contact with some of my former college coaches, and to this point now, I mean, I feel like I'm still young in the game. I feel like I'm still very naive, but like I said, as long as you want to expand, go long in this career as a coach, always ask those questions. And then, yeah, just hoping for a good season with the small group that we have with the jumpers. Like you kind of say, I feel like this generation, when it comes to just information itself, you might find a lot of stuff on either Instagram or TikTok. Sometimes find a way to implement it into your training. So
Yeah.
Ask those questions to the coaches and sit down and figure out what's going to fit you best.
Yeah, there is a wealth of information between, Instagram, YouTube, right? You go through, and some things are just someone trying to capitalize, quick dash here, quick something there. But man, if you take your time, like you said, and look through it, one thing I found interesting this last year was I started working with a Paralympian, and they had a coaching stipend set up, through USA Track and Field, where if you just signed on as a coach, you would get like $100 a month. But if you were certified, level 1 certified, that money would triple, $300 a month. So, okay. So I've never been one of those people that's like, I got to have all these things after my name, like I've got if I wanted to list the things that I have after my name, it would have been, undergrad degree at UCLA kinesiology, and then a master's in exercise science at Cal State Long Beach. That's about as far as I would go. And I'm like, well, I don't need all this other stuff. I don't get it. What is level 1, this, board certified that, what does that really mean? Do you know what you're doing or don't you? But I did go through it. And I did the level 1 certification, and there was a lot of information in there. I would say pleasantly surprised that it was very professional. I didn't have any, clueless about a lot of things, but I hadn't heard anybody ever talk about it, having gone through it, and me never putting that much weight on it before. So it was it was a little bit eye-opening. I was like, okay, there's actually some pretty good information here, and pretty sound. And for not for a beginning coach, may even have been a little overwhelming how much information was presented. I didn't find it overwhelming, but I definitely found it in a lot of ways confirming. And then there were some, because they talk about the events that well, but then there was also events you didn't know so well. And as I was listening to some of that stuff, I was definitely picking up some pointers, and they did go through some periodization concepts and some other things. I was like, yeah, it's pretty thorough. It even made me think about doing the level 2, but they hadn't at that time set the new ones out yet. And you have to travel somewhere for those. So the ones that I did, you could do by the Zoom, and it was literally 3 days in a row, like 8 hours, which I thought was crazy. I'm just like, I got to work and I'm coaching. So you want me to keep the Zoom call? I mean, I literally had to keep my phone charged and listen out of one ear and do other things. It was wild, but still worth it, surprisingly. So yeah, I would echo that sentiment with you. And I would say also too that if you're just starting, depends on your level as an athlete, I guess too, because a lot of times, it's not always the great athletes that turn into great coaches. But it's not a bad place to start either. You look at basketball. I mean, how many of those guys end up getting head jobs that never even went back? I'm talking about NBA jobs. Some of those guys never even go back and start coaching at high school or college level. They just go, hey, you want the head job? I'm thinking of Steve Nash, for instance, just a few years ago. I don't remember him working anywhere else. Now, maybe I wasn't paying close enough attention, which I've been accused of many times, but I don't think so. And then they come back and they can coach, obviously, at that level. They played at that level. They know what's going on at that level. They're not going to be overwhelmed by a whole lot. But some achieve higher levels than others. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you got Eric Spoelstra, who I don't even know if he ever played, but he's, by all accounts, a great coach. And, he started off by being the film guy, right? Where he'd film all the Heats games and help analyze what they were doing, on the court. And then, has progressed under the tutelage of old Pat Riley with the slick back hair and, become a great coach. So yeah, getting in there is the tough part. I think the biggest thing that you haven't covered, but you've mentioned it in a bunch of different ways, is that passion. I think in track and field, you got to have a passion for it, because like we said, the remuneration, getting paid, you probably are going to find a lot of people supplementing, what they're doing. They're probably not just coaching, unless it, depends on the place and the level. I know I couldn't just do that out here in California, not with what they were paying. Like I said, I'm hoping that the money trickles down. UCLA starts paying everybody more, and maybe I'll go back to work from for my alma mater. That'd be a long circle. Well, hey, Jarrick, I really appreciate your time. I want to keep this door open between us. I don't have any clients in Texas. I only went back once. I'm a Niner fan, so the Niners in Texas just, doesn't happen most of the time. I grew up hating the Cowboys. I still do. But we went to right. We went to SMU my senior year in 1986, right before they got the death penalty, and they had so much money when they flew us in. They took us in minivans to a little 2-bedroom condos. We stayed there the night, got up the next day and went to this nice meet, and I was just like, wow, this is, and the people were great. Just the nicest people in the world, just like, oh, where are you all from? It was like, I work from UCLA. Oh, you guys here for that big meet? Oh yeah. Well, good luck. And it was like, okay, I like Texas. I got to go back. It's been since 1986, to be quite honest. So what is that? 14 and 23, 37 years. Okay. It's a small hop, but I've been having this fantasy about taking sky high and fly jump camps on the road. So I want to stay in touch about that and get some ideas later on about how to make that happen. So, well, hey, again, thanks for your time. Thanks for your words of wisdom to the up and coming coaches. And I think if you're listening out there, and again, this is Troy Haynes with my guest Jarrick Wright, and this is the Sky High and Fly Jump Camps podcast called Raise the Bar, and we've been talking for an hour, and I'm starting to put Jarrick to sleep. So, but he did a really succinct job of sharing his passion and then giving us the kind of a look into that world. So those of you that are out there and want to get started, that's the way to go. So, well, hey, let's do this again. I leave the invitation open, and I want to find a way to Texas, even in the summer when it's hot, because that's when I get to travel because I'm a teacher.
Just let me know.
All right, sir. Well, hey, thanks again. We'll talk soon, and keep those eyes and ears open. I know I'm gonna be looking at your posts and seeing whatever it is that you're doing lately. You guys said you're coming up on your indoors in December. How long is that season? Is it pretty tight little window from beginning to end?
Yeah, you can say that. I mean, first meet will be December 1st. Our last one might be somewhere at the end or middle of February. So
yeah, 2 or 3. Yeah, it's pretty short. As I out here in California, it's minuscule. All of our indoor qualifiers are technically outdoor meets because there's nowhere to go. Nobody has any indoor facilities out here. So, do you guys do that too, or do you have indoor training facilities there in Texas, or is it all outdoor?
Mostly outdoor. The only ones that you'll probably find is probably going to be Texas Tech. I know A&M. They should be getting done pretty soon with their new indoor facility.
Yeah, well, it'd be nice to have something indoors in the summer, right? When it's roasting during the fall.
Love it.
Yeah. All right, Jarrick. Hey, thanks again, man. Appreciate you, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
All right. Good night. And that's going to wrap it up for us here on Raise the Bar, the Sky High and Fly Jump Camps podcast. I'm your host, Troy Haynes, and we just spent an hour with Jarrick Wright from Sam Houston State. He was a sprinter there. He started off his career at the University of St. Thomas, was promoted to assistant and then head coach by 2023. And in the last 3 seasons, he's produced 28 all-conference athletes and is doing a fantastic job. You get to hear us go back and forth about sprint technique and training. He's a strong believer in unilateral work, one-legged work. And we talked a little bit about his training regimen and just bounce some things around. So appreciate Jarrick and his time. And we're going to see if we can't get Sky High and Fly Jump Camps out there to Texas this summer, which should be a great vacation. So until next time, this is Troy Haynes from Raised Bar signing off.